All right, it being 5:30, I'll call this joint work session to order. You join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, this is a joint work session of the City Council and the Urban Renewal Agency. We won't be making any decisions tonight. It just gives us an opportunity to preview and discuss future agenda items. If you're wondering why I've been called up from the practice squad, it's because Mayor Benetti and Council President Marler couldn't be here in person tonight. So Mayor Benetti asked me to lead the meeting. Also, Councilor DeNovo and Councilor Farmer will not be attending tonight, but Mayor Benetti is on virtually. The next item of business is the public comment. If anybody has a public comment that isn't a comment on an agenda item, we'll take it now. Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. Review of the upcoming City Council and Urban Renewal Agency Board agenda items. Item A is review of request for reimbursement on facade improvement grant at 375 Central Avenue.
I can take that one.
Oh, okay. I guess we do have some public comment. First one is that, can you see how to pronounce that? Tauber?
Are you, I think they're commenting on the, are you commenting on the
Oh,
flag?
the pride flag. Okay, we'll wait till that item's up. Thank you. Go ahead, Roger.
Yes, previously the Urban Renewal Agency approved a facade grant for 375 Central, also known as Old City Hall. Part of the project included replacing some windows. Unfortunately, they've been unable to find suitable windows because that's an historic building. In addition, they're not getting any assistance from the state because the state has closed the position that was providing assistance through the State Historic Preservation Office. While that's the case, they expended far more than what they had originally done. They'll still continue to seek out window replacement where possible. But because they've extended more than 50% of the approved grant allocation, they're requesting, and staff is supporting, that we go ahead and pay off the remaining portion of the award. I think you can see that they've done an excellent job. The building looks so much better than it used to.
Yeah, my paid job, we're also working on a project and ran into numerous problems, so I can understand that. Any comments or questions?
It's a difficult time for construction materials, so I understand. I agree with the direction. Okay,
item B, review of request for urban renewal improvement grant request for 260 and 265 South Broadway.
Hello, councilors. This is Carolyn. This particular application is for two project areas that have jointly submitted for a grant. They're requesting funding to come up to about 75% of the total construction project costs. That's included in your attachments. The two addresses are 260 South Broadway, which is Restaurant O. Your staff report outlines the work that they would be doing on their elevations. And the second is 265 South Broadway, which is my yarn shop, also doing some elevation work, LED lighting, etc. This is presented to you for some discussion. The owners of the businesses were invited to participate, so I don't know if they're on the line, but if they are and you'd like to hear from them, this would be a good time to ask.
So Rob, this is Joe Benetti.
Yeah.
So I'd like to declare that I have a potential conflict of interest. I'm the owner of this building. but Dr. Rika Cruz and Owen O'Neill have indicated that they have an option to purchase this building, which they intend to do. Also, we had a set price on that project, on that property, so anything they do will not benefit me financially. But I just want to disclose all that before we get started on this piece of property for this potential grant.
Thank you, Mayor. So I see Owen, and do you guys want to make a comment on this? Or?
No, we applied for the grant obviously for recent events. We've had very big financial issues just like anybody else. We've had some damage to the front of the building and we'd like to try and get it repaired as soon as possible. Obviously last Christmas time we wanted to be working exploded, so we're still waiting on that. But it's just been a domino effect. It's been really, really hard on us. Like every other restaurant in the country, I think it's very hard.
Any questions? Anything else, Carolyn?
That's all I have.
Okay. Well, like Owen said, restaurants have been hit really hard, and so I agree with the city manager that this is our biggest bang for the buck, and I support this project. Next is C, discussion regarding revision to previously approved facade improvement grant request for 275 North Broadway, the Tioga Building.
I'll go ahead and take that one. The 275 Broadway is the Tioga Building, probably the most noticeably improved building in the city currently, given the huge facade project that's been undertaken there. While the agency has already approved a facade grant for the exterior, which included repainting the building, adding exterior lighting, accent lighting, redoing the historic sign, and adding wrought iron fencing in the back and some lighting in the parking lot. The owners were also busy on the interior, undertaking a lot of improvements to, and I believe it's 57 apartments that are on the interior. They have not fixed them all, but there was a number of them, and I believe it was 10%, that actually have been unrentable for years. One of the council's goals was to address housing and available housing units. I believe they're trying to do that. You'll remember they're the same owners that put, I believe, 10 apartments in above the old Buggy Bank building. They have come back and they've requested an additional $200,000, $100,000 to assist with the work they've been doing on refurbishing apartments, but the other $100,000 was to refurbish the second floor. Those that have been around for some time will remember that that had a grand ballroom in it, which was in service at one time, and then it became the Mongolian Grill, and for the past couple of decades, it's pretty much been dormant, other than a small portion that's rented out. They would like to change that and create a shared work space, kind of an economic development incubator program, and provide some additional space. One of the urban renewal goals is to take underdeveloped or underutilized second floors and improve those so that they're contributing to the overall economy of the downtown. I think I did send the council, and I'm sorry I don't have them here for you, I sent some pretty rough-looking pictures of what that place looks like. Currently, I've toured it myself. It's going to take a lot of work.
Were those photos of the second floor?
Yes.
Okay.
And some of the photos, though, were of rooms as well.
Okay.
And then I provided you a floor plan. Rob Crocker, the principal owner of that building, I believe, is online and may be interested in speaking as well.
Mr. Crocker?
Yeah. Yeah, happy to add a little color here. Yeah, we've been at this building for about a year and a half now. It's been a labor of love, for sure. The images that I did share with the city manager that I believe he shared with you are, some of them are of some of the rooms, and you can kind of see the situations that we're running into, which we're tackling. And frankly, repainting and resealing the envelope of the building is going to go a long way, has gone a long way to helping with that, as a lot of the issues we had were with moisture and mold. So a lot of those rooms weren't actually habitable, and now they are becoming habitable. So that's great. As far as the second floor goes, yeah, that whole second floor, the ballroom, I've talked to one person who thought that he may have had the last event in there, which was, I think he said 2003, a wedding reception. So it's been almost 20 years since that space has been used. Currently, the only occupant up there is the radio station I should know this, 1059. Our goal is, yeah, that whole space has been vacant. The ballroom, as many of you know, back in when it opened in 1949 through the 50s, really, that kind of was the social gathering place in Coos Bay, North Bend. And it really hasn't been for decades. So our goal is to rehabilitate that entire second floor, including the event space of the ballroom, and then turn what used to be originally the Pirates Den into a shared co-working space. So we would have 4 or 5 small offices that could be leased, and then some open working space. We've had a number of small business owners ask us if we have space available, and we really don't. So we know that there is a demand for this, and being up there on the second floor, right on Broadway, right in downtown, with a view of the bay is going to be pretty cool. And then also to be able to reactivate that ballroom as an event space that could be used for civic meetings as well as for business meetings and seminars and such. We would also plan on creating 2 boardrooms that could be used by either the folks that were leasing space and or by the community. We can make those available for use. So yeah, like Roger said, it's going to be another huge project. We kind of put it on the, when we first bought the building, we thought this was going to be one of the first things we tackled because we wanted to reactivate that. But once COVID hit and there was really no reason to renovate a space when people couldn't gather. But now that hopefully COVID's subsiding, we want to tackle this as our next project, and we're really excited about it.
So Rob, can you tell me how many the apartments that aren't in use are going to get put into use?
That are not into use?
The ones, there's some that haven't been used in a while, but you're going to put them back into use, is that correct?
Yeah, most of the ones that haven't been used for a while, currently we do have them either back in use or really close. So they'll all be back into use. So we will have 57 units again. So they'll all be reactivated and made available.
Great. Any questions? Joe, I keep forgetting about you. Any questions?
No, but I just think, this is good use of urban renewal dollars. This shows, what has been done, part of it, and what can be done with more dollars. I mean, if anyone's been driving by and seeing the tug, it looks fantastic compared to what it used to. So I applaud Rob and his other partner in getting this done. So yeah, I think this is a good project.
Great, thank you.
Do we
Thank
do we have the total of urban renewal dollars that have gone towards this project if this is approved?
So, I don't know if I can take that or if Roger wants to, but I did put on your guys' desks today some information for downtown and Empire regarding the projects that had already been approved, what we've paid to date, what's outstanding. There's 2 sheets, one is for downtown and one is for Empire. So if you look at that line for the Tioga Koski, you can see what you guys had previously approved at the 296,000. We've paid to date 198. That leaves 97,000 of the original approved amount.
Does that answer your questions, Deb?
Yeah, and Rob, can you allude to the fact, or allude to the amount that you have invested in that property?
To date, well, I'll tell you one thing. The last time I saw it, it was about 1.4 million is what we've invested so far into the project. And there's, I mean, if we wanted to, we could easily invest that again. We're going to start with the ballroom, and I imagine that project is probably going to be, minimum $350,000 to $450,000. And then the rooms that we just continue to do are, just ongoing. We were probably of these 57 rooms, we've probably renovated close to 20 of them so far, I bet.
So your investment in that building, which is our largest building in downtown, is pretty significant and is ongoing.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm sure when it's all said and done, it'll be well over a $2 million capital investment into that building. But it's worth it. It's an amazing building, and it is the tallest building on the Oregon coast, and it's a beacon for downtown Coos Bay, and we're really proud of it, and we hear great feedback from everyone, so we're excited.
Those were the questions I had.
Carmen?
So this is Joe, Rob. Again, I have a question for Nicole and Roger, I guess either one. So we have allocated our budget $750,000 for improvement grants for the downtown Coos Bay area. But that doesn't mean we're limited to that amount. If necessary, which I hope we allocate all those dollars, we could go and allocate more into that line item. Am I correct?
That is correct. In fact, we didn't spend, or not all the money that was allocated for last year was spent. Some of the projects are still ongoing, and so there's actually far more dollars there. Nicole had put together some documentation for us, and showing that this year and the unspent money for last year was a little over $1,154,000. If the projects that are currently under consideration get funded, there's still quite a bit of money for this year for consideration.
Thank you.
And that 791,000, that's after projected allocations of projects that we're receiving requests from.
Yes, so that kind of lower section there is what we may receive in this year based on applications that are either in the pre-app or coming to you in a future meeting, so.
Okay, so just for the public's benefit, there was a carryover, which Roger alluded to, which made that fund higher for 2021-22 fiscal year. And remaining, should we fund all of the requests that are in front of us or coming in, would be $791,000 left for that building improvement fund from the Urban Renewal Agency.
Any further discussion? Well, like Rob said, it's an iconic building in our town, and I think the improvements have been outstanding to date. So I look forward to seeing more.
I concur.
Where are we at? D, consideration of city fee schedule revision options related to recent Coos Bay Municipal Code Title 17 amendments. Is this you again, Carolyn?
Yes, sir. The council undertook quite a bit of work this last 8 months on amendments to the comprehensive plan and the development code. Much of that was related to housing, but the other piece of it was really focused on part of some of your economic development goals, which included, streamlining the process so folks can get through the system with more efficiency. So all that being said, we now have a development code that has some very tight but flexible processes to go through so that people can realize their projects sooner. Unfortunately, our fees don't really match this particular style of development processing. We really want to see kind of a user-based system whereby fees are reflective of the amount of time that's put in by staff. We operate, if you average all our costs for all the planning and front office staff, about a $70 an hour mark to develop these projects. And what we've done is we've gone through and identified the various types of permits that are available for folks to use as they go through the process, and assigned a certain amount of time that might be spent on both of them. It's not a perfect match. Sometimes you're going to make more, sometimes you're going to make less, but generally we feel like the fees that we've assigned to to all of these permits will be reflective of the time that we spend on these projects. One feature that we think, though, is very important is that for the bigger projects like annexations, comprehensive plan amendments, development code changes, that the city continue its practice to utilize professional consulting services for that. I think you saw that work successfully this last couple of years with some of the larger projects that we've done. One of them was a development project, the Jordan Cove project, but for the most part, they have been focused on comprehensive plan and development code changes. In these cases, we would be looking at billing out at 115% of consultant costs, so that your staff time to manage these consultant contracts can be covered. Budget implications, I think it's safe to say that we would anticipate an improved revenue stream on this. When I was looking back at my revenues for planning fees that we look at each month, and realized that $39,000 was all that we recovered last year, it was a little disheartening. But on the plus side, here you are taking the opportunity to look at these fees and equate them to the value of time and materials that your staff spends. And that includes not just myself and your planner, but that includes the front office staff. That includes your director when he finalizes, when he signs off, city manager, yourselves. So I think that it's fair to say that we've come up with something I think is pretty good. We did a little cost comparison to some of the other cities in the area. Florence, Bandon, North Bend were the three. Very interesting. Some of these, one in particular, Bandon, their fees were fairly high in some areas, and then in other areas, they simply didn't identify any fees at all. No two communities are alike, so what we did was we tried to kind of match these to like permits in other cities. I think we came out fairly equitable. I think trying to go to the top of the heap, like some of these that we see in Bandon, number one, wasn't really realistic to the amount of time that we put into projects, and number two, I think when you do look at fee increases, you need to be sensitive to the fact that, folks have to be eased into sometimes paying their fair share. And I think it's the right thing to do to not, max out every single time. You want to look for an average. And sometimes you make more, sometimes you make less, but generally we think these are fair. So we would encourage your comments, and we would be back for you to take a look at a resolution to adopt these fees next week, if that's your desire.
So if I may add, I did talk to Commissioner Cribbins, and they are on a user fee basis for the county now. Before, they were on a fee schedule similar to other communities, but they were finding that they had to supplement those fees with property tax dollars or general fund dollars, and that's where we're at. We're supplementing through general fund dollars the permitting process, and we're really trying to move it to a similar model, that of building codes, where it's a user pay system.
Any questions or comments? Sorry.
I think that there's room for improvement on this. I don't want to see the city being at a loss for the work that they're doing at the front office there. So, yeah, I think we've been on the low end for quite a while. I mean, personally, feels like 1 million permits a year. They see my face down there a lot. So I think that this, as I get permits, I see room for some growth there, just to make it easier. Maybe we could even hire more staff at some point in time. I would like to see that.
I think it's important to note as well that there were some items that didn't rise, they actually went down.
Correct.
And that's based, I'm assuming, on historical information on those. Just a note of change you may want on page 6, type 4. You have Roman numerals and regular in there. You struck out 3 in the other one. I didn't know if you wanted to strike that out.
Great.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Joe, questions, comments?
No, I think it's a process that needs to be looked at and hasn't been for a while, and it needs to be adjusted. And as Carolyn mentioned, it's not a user pay system. We're subsidizing this, and so it's. I think it's important that we adjust these every so often. And even Carmen mentioned that it's kind of low. And also, I need to, I'm not sure if system development charges, which we don't do here, would play into helping offset some of this, but we don't have that in the city. So it's something that I think is important to, that other entities and cities do have, which we do not. So that would affect the developer. So I think this is necessary and more than fair, I should say.
So my only question, Carolyn, is you talked about being more efficient. So I'm having a hard time understanding how being more efficient creates more work. Can you explain that?
Well, my focus on that, my comment on that was really related to the type 4 permits. And those are typically much more complex and take much more time. And there's a lot more, there are a lot more requirements for paperwork from the state on those. And we're staffed to do those projects. You have to look at it as, what are we taking away from other projects to do those? And in my mind, it's more efficient to hire a consultant to handle that, even though you have to manage their contract to get that work done, so you're not tying up your staff on those particular projects. What's kind of interesting about, I don't want to take you too far into the weeds, but what's kind of interesting about that type of planning processing is that there are no time limits like there are with your development permits. So some of these amendment types could take a very long time, and it just eats into your time that you could be doing on other things. So that was my reference.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Anybody from the public? Hearing none, we'll move on to E, presentation of the pre-design report for wastewater treatment plant 1. This is Jennifer.
I'm going to have Stefan Sties, the city's wastewater water quality engineer, present this one.
Stefan, new here with the city. I have Craig Massey here with Jacobs Engineering. He's the lead designer for the upgrades that we're looking into for the wastewater treatment plant 1. The background on this is that the plant was constructed in 1954. It was a primary treatment plant, upgraded in 1973 to add secondary treatment to the plant, and then upgraded again in 1990 extensively to make the plant more efficient and meet DEQ standards. So as you can see, that's typically on a 20-year time frame that a treatment plant gets upgraded substantially. and that's a typical engineering rule of thumb and DEQ recommendation. So from 1990, we're well past the 20-year mark. Over the 30 years since we've had a substantial improvement there, the plant. And with that, there's lots of added cost and deferred maintenance that goes on and increases the cost. To address this, there's a facility plan that's put together, addresses all the issues that are there at the plant, tries to prioritize what needs to be done, and put costs to preliminary costs to these upgrades. This was done in 2007, was worked through with DEQ, and by 2011 it was finalized. A bit of back and forth, bit of a process there. So then that was 2011. According to DEQ, you have to have your facility plan updated every 10 years, or you can have between 5 and 10 years, you can have a facility plan amendment. So we were able to do that between the 5 and 10 year mark. The facility plan amendment was done by Jacobs Engineering, Greg Massey. From there, that's reviewed by another third-party engineering firm for a value assessment. And then all of that information is then tied into a pre-design report, which is where we're at right now, taking all of the past recommendations and trying to tie them into our 30% design, which is what Craig will be presenting to us.
So I've got a presentation on my computer just so I can kind of see it, and I'll try to, who is it that's actually okay. I apologize now because I did one of those animation things where every click is like the next bullet.
Okay.
I didn't want people to be reading ahead of me talking, so I'll try to give you the signal. And I gotta say, I've never had this many public attend when I get up and talk about wastewater. It's kind of exciting. I hope that it's as exciting for you.
Greg, I was just going to ask for the public that is both in here and online. This is Plant 1, which is downtown.
Correct.
The city of Coos Bay is fortunate to have 2 wastewater treatment plants, so just so everyone knows.
And one considerably newer than the other. Yeah, so, okay, so there's the title slide. Yeah, the next slide, this is essentially just a timeline that reiterates what Stefan just talked about, that the plant was substantially upgraded in 1990 with 2 new components added. In fact, we talked to the contractor that was the superintendent for the project back then to get his recollections, which were frankly remarkable, that he would remember the detail that he had. It's a challenging site, but it's also a testament to the approach the city has taken to take the infrastructure you have and then try to repurpose it forward. So there's elements of the plant that do go back to 1950s and are still providing a benefit to you. Next slide. So in our facility plan amendment, which was an abbreviated form of updating the facility plan, initially DEQ wanted a full-blown facility plan, but we convinced them that the city was acting close enough in time to the approved facility plan that a little smaller effort could be done. And so we really focused on 3 phases. Next slide. We identified a phase 1, which is mostly liquids treatment improvements and dealing with flow. A second phase, which was mostly solid treatment improvements. The timing of that phase is kind of subject to how the current digester is performing, which is performing very well, and the additional loads that come from treatment plant 2. To explain that briefly, the excess biological cellular matter that you have to remove from your treatment system on a regular basis, or you just grow too many bugs, you typically treat and remove as beneficial fertilizer. It can be land applied. But rather than have that extra treatment at plant 2 rather, those that waste activated sludge is actually sent to plant one, where it's treated at plant one. There was adequate capacity within the existing infrastructure. So you're getting that treatment at just a single plant. Next down. Phase 3 was planned disinfection improvements and potential effluent pumping. And those were initially identified to be a result of potential regulatory changes and potentially high flows that may or may not be real. The lack of good influent data at the plant and the use of DEQ's model for projecting peak flows resulted in some very, very high flows that would require you to ultimately pump it into the bay rather than have it flow by gravity as it does now. That I think when we get good instrumentation in place, we'll get a much better handle on whether that peak flow is a real value or not. But that need to pump it is off in a future phase 3 that I think is well down the road. Next slide. Oh, I guess that's what I just said there. So, okay, the so the project costs identified in the facility plan amendment, now updated to 2023 dollars. Phase 1, which was the really identified liquids treatment improvements, known scope, 14.3 million. Next, 6.6 million for phase 2. This is primarily the solids improvements. And then the next phase 3, was 18.4. That effluent pumping was the big share of that, and the disinfection improvements identified. Next slide. As Stefan mentioned, an independent engineering firm came in and did a value assessment. That's a typical DEQ requirement for a project of this size. And they recommended 3 things that we further considered in the pre-design and have actually incorporated into the pre-design. Next. The first was a cost-saving item to reduce the diameter of the new secondary clarifier proposed, so it matched the size of the one that's there. We can get adequate treatment at all the future projected flows with that. Next one. The next was to construct a new full-capacity chlorine contact basin. That was a phase 3 cost that we'd identified that they're suggesting move to phase 1. We agreed with that, and part of the reason why we agreed with that was that there were issues that were occurring at the plant with disinfection at the time, and the current contact basin has no redundancy built into it at all, and it was compounded that there was a failure in a clarifier that further challenged the plant's reliability around disinfection. So it seemed like a very wise investment to move that into phase 1. We felt that the primary sludge thickening potentially would be needed, and you'll see when I talk about phasing the project, we actually think that's now a phase 2 element, but it was originally proposed by the VE team to be in phase 1. Next bullet. So in summary, what the VA, the value assessment team, suggested was, things that were really known, the treatment capacity needed to be provided by the clarifier, and getting reliability in the disinfection should be done first, and then those things that can be staged and need more definition based on just the experience of time at this plant over 5 to 10 years could be moved into later phases. Next bullet, we incorporated those into the pre-design report, and it overall had the effect of reducing the cumulative cost of all 3 phases, but moving some costs from later phases into earlier phases, and in one case, earlier phase into a later phase. So let me go through that next. I think that's the next slide. So go to the next links. So our recommendation for potential phasing here is phase 1, which would be the clarifier and the disinfection improvements, and modest automation of the aeration system, which is currently a completely manual operation. Next slide. Oh, I guess, sorry, that's just what I listed. So go on down one more. Then our phase 2. This unfortunately, that 4.3, that should be 6 million. I've corrected it on my slide, and you'll see on the next slide, which has got a bar chart showing it, that's correct on that one. And I'll make sure that for the record you get this corrected. But phase 2, that was the solids improvements. We feel that one element of that, which is a wet weather treatment tool, SEPT, engineers love acronyms, chemically enhanced primary treatment, SEPT. That there was a permanent SEPT element in phase 1. The plant currently has a full-scale pilot facility in place, so they can actually implement that use of that tool today. So we think we can defer that to phase 2. Next slide. And similarly, the primary treatment, we think we can defer, the primary treatment diversion around the aeration basins, we can defer to the next phase. Next slide. And then the primary sludge thickening, based on the performance that we've observed with the digesters and how they're handling the additional load from plant 2, we think that sludge thickening improvement can be deferred. Next.
So all of those items are things that we don't quite fully understand yet. So the idea is not wanting to bite off or do more than what's needed. With the first phase, we'll be able to get a lot more information about the plant and then be able to fine tune these next phases and know what is actually needed and not do more than what's going to be needed.
The age of the plant is such that compared to your new plant 2, which has full automation and instrumentation and monitoring of flows, this plant doesn't have a lot of those in place. And so the city's actually implemented some improvements in the interim to address some of those things. And that additional data is what's going to make the timing of these next steps more certain. Next slide. Yeah, so what would be in this phase 3 would be the effluent pump station if needed, next bullet, and then waste activated sludge thickening if needed, and that would be driven by, again, the solids treatment limitation. So if you go to the next slide, this is just graphically showing those costs. So originally, the facility plan amendment had a phase 1, 2, and 3 estimate. These are project costs, so it's construction plus engineering and administration. It's all in 2023 dollars. That's what we project the midpoint of construction might be. That's really relevant for phase 1. Not knowing the timing in phase 2 or 3, it would be different dollar amounts in the future. But 14 million, 7 million, and 18 million for the facility plan amendment recommendations. 17, 6, and 13 for the pre-design, and really the big difference is the movement of the chlorine contact basin from the third phase into the first phase. The next thing to talk about is some of the projects that the city has implemented and have underway now to help get the information needed to make the right timing decisions. So getting accuracy around the actual flows that are coming into the plant. There's a influent metering upgrade. It's about $200,000. That picture is actually the next bullet here. That's the headwork screen that was in the phase 1 estimate at $540,000. But the city had some money available to accelerate that replacement. And it was good timing. The bids came in. Low responsible bidder was $370,000. So there's a savings there. Plus that'll be installed and online probably by next spring. Next, I mentioned the age of the plant. That much of the operation is manual, and one improvement that they've put in place already is to monitor the level of dissolved oxygen in the aeration basins so that the operators can adjust the amount of air going to the basins to get optimal treatment. That's something that we'll be able to pick up and use and automate so that operators don't have to do that on a several time a day basis, but a control system can do that automatically. Next. And then similarly, with the questions around the solids handling at the plant, putting flow meters on the 2 biosolid streams that are going into the digesters will give us the information we need to know when that improvement, around thickening those flow streams would need to be done. The good news is that the digesters have been running well, and they've been able to make the required Class B biosolids consistently. So we expect that that's going to continue. This plant doesn't see a lot of growth, over the years of the planning period. The loads to the plant are growing at a very modest rate, not significantly at all. Next slide. Finally, the last project underway is a replacement of the boiler, which uses both diesel and biogas to heat up the contents of the digesters to facilitate the process of digestion. Okay, so then what's not included in the facility plan amendment and subsequently in the pre-design? General door, window, handrail replacement, next. Plant drain pumps, digester lids, upgrade to the operations building. That was looked at, but then removed from the pre-design based on cost. Plant-wide architectural repair, there are just doors and windows and louvers and things that are just past their useful life. Next. And then basically replacement of equipment that is at or past its useful life. One of the digested sludge recirculation pumps is an example. And as a part of the facility plan, we did an exhaustive condition assessment. So we have on a scale of 1 to 5, the condition of all of the pumps and piping systems, valves, blowers, air compressors. Those aren't included because typically DEQ in their facility planning is expecting you to identify capital projects, and most of these are just kind of ongoing operation and maintenance type repairs that are typically done when a piece of equipment fails, it's simply replaced. So now, if some of those can be incorporated into a capital project, there may be some advantage to that, but most of those are what most plants would just routinely repair as their condition warranted it.
And I think a big takeaway from that too is that it's still going to be, a lot of the plants still very old, right? So like plant 1, we got the new plant and it's really nice and shiny and everything's great on it. And we're going to have some nice new parts to this plant, but there's still going to be a good portion of it still the 1973 plant.
Even 1954.
Yeah. So just trying to set expectations, what it's going to look like.
So construction challenges, next one. It's a major retrofit project, unlike Plant 2, which was essentially a greenfield project, which is easier for a contractor to do. They just come in and they basically have a site available, and there are a couple of key tie-ins, but not a lot of interface with an existing operation or even responsibility to make sure what you're doing maintains the operation of the plant. This is going to be different. Next, we're going to be maintaining operations the entire time. Next, we're going to have to work around the existing facilities. Generally speaking, the improvements that we're making here are in an area of the plant that was set aside for adding this kind of infrastructure. It's kind of to the side of the plant, but there are still complications with tie-in of piping. I know there's a water pipe that comes down, the abandoned right-of-way that runs through the middle of the plant. That's going to be something to work around. And then just a host of other challenges. Subsurface uncertainty. We gained a little bit more certainty about it in our conversation with the superintendent from 1990, and that was valuable. I mean, there's nothing like firsthand experience. It's somebody who had to go out there and dig these big excavations and keep the water in the bay back. So that's helped us. Next bullet.
Main thing we do know about it is that it's challenging subsurface
Yeah,
conditions.
he described it as dredging, so a lot of this area was filled with dredging. And I don't know if that's, I mean, that's just anecdotal, maybe there's others in the room that know whether that was the case or not. But he in his excavation, he found a lot of evidence of this being, you know, kind of haphazard fill. Logs, stones.
About the worst way you can place the material
Yeah.
on site.
Yeah.
Great.
Pile foundations are going to be required for most structures. That's nothing new. Our cost estimate assumed that, you know, way back in the facility plan amendment. What we learned between the facility plan amendment and the pre-design, and I think I shared this last time I presented at the fire station, that Jan Kerbo found construction records that indicated that in the field, the piles were actually 60 feet deep, not 30 feet as the design drawings showed. So they obviously found conditions in the field that required a much deeper pile. So we know that going in, and we've accommodated that in the cost estimate. And we know there's going to be, we've got a significant allowance for dewatering required for the excavations, although just anecdotally, in the conversation with the superintendent today, I was surprised when he said that they managed the dewatering of two-inch pumps. So it's not, I think we're comfortably conservative. I don't think we'd want to cut back based on one data point like that, but that's encouraging. Okay, next. Project delivery. For any public entity looking at a project like this, there's really two viable approaches. Conventional design bid build, where you do the full design and you advertise and award to the lowest bidder next. And then what's emerged in probably the last 15 years in Oregon and Washington, construction manager general contractor, CMGC, the approach we used on Plant 2, that's where the contractor is hired during the design phase. They provide cost estimating, some constructability input, and then they develop a guaranteed maximum price, and that's typically prescribed to be done in a competitive way. So they have to go out and get bids for all the crafts and the materials and the equipment, and if they want to self-perform, they have to bid on that as well. Next slide. Our current CMGC experience, however, I would say, especially in the last 6 to 8 years, we've seen mixed results. Next. We expect the cost to be higher. In fact, we currently have pulled out the additional costs in the estimates that would have reflected a CMGC delivery. And those extra costs are primarily upfront because you're paying the contractor to work with you during the design. But in our experience reviewing guaranteed maximum prices, we think we've seen prices that are higher than what we would expect if you were doing a conventional design bid build. And then last bullet, the risk of additional costs are potentially likely to be lower, but I think that, you know, given the site that we have here and what we know historically, we have ways to identify these potential site changes to the contractor and manage those. I think maybe the other thing I would add to our recent CMGC experience is just that while it promised a real benefit, we haven't consistently seen the follow-through during the construction phase. We haven't seen the benefit or the handoff necessarily, and I'm not simply talking about the experience with Plant 2 in Coos Bay, but I've had that experience recently on a couple of other projects. So it just may be how that delivery method is maturing as it gets to become more popular. It could be simply the market challenges. I mean, if anybody's been to Home Depot or a lumber store, you know it's a lot more expensive to do a home project, and we're seeing that in the construction industry as well. There's I think copper peaked at an all-time or 20-year high here about a month ago. A lot of the metals prices are up, so it's challenging. Next, so our recommendation is to stick with conventional design bid build, but there are a couple of options that we might want to incorporate into that. One is to do a pre-qualification requirement. So for somebody to bid on the project, they would have to answer the pre-qualification requirements and demonstrate appropriate experience. They would then be pre-qualified and they would be eligible to bid, and we would bid it out. Next bullet. This is an approach that the city of Bend has taken on a lot of their infrastructure projects, and that's to add pretty significant qualification requirements and issue the advertisement for bid, not as an advertisement for bid, but as an invitation to propose or request for proposal. Next. Like CMGC, it would require the city council approval. Next. You would define criteria that they have to meet, and to comply with the ORS, you have to describe to the proposers how you're going to score it and what the criteria is, and they would propose and provide a sealed envelope with their bid at the same time. If they meet a certain threshold score, you would then open their envelope, and then they would get a score based on their cost, and you would award on the overall combination of their proposal score and their cost score. Next, it has the benefit of still getting a competitive lump sum bid. I'm sort of, and this is a decision that would be made during the pre-design, as the pre-design is finished. I don't know that the first bullet there, the option to require pre-qualification, wouldn't be sufficient in this case here. But that's, we're not looking for a decision, but we're just simply teeing up that even within design bid build, there's a way to try to secure a qualified contractor.
And I think the main difference between just a straight pre-qualifications and the second option is that you're weighing the pre-qualifications. And it's not just a straight pass-fail of, sorry, you missed this one thing by a little bit, you can't bid. Yeah. Even though there might be a great contractor in all other ways, it weighs out all the different pros and cons of each contractor.
But the fundamental delivery recommendation is conventional design bid build. We think that's appropriate here, and is going to be the best cost value for the city. Next slide. I think that's it. So. Oh, thank you. No one wants to know what biosolids really are. I usually get that one. They're not what you think they are.
Any questions, comments? Joe?
Yeah, I have one. So, Greg, if we were to build a new plant, do you have any idea or estimated costs on what that would cost versus this?
That's a good question. You know, the infrastructure that we're adding here is only a small portion of what you would need in a new plant, right? So the heart of this plant is the aeration basins, and you have adequate volume and capacity to treat the load for a long, long time into the future. So a new plant that wouldn't take advantage of that existing infrastructure would have to replicate that volume again. So, you know, it's going to be, you know, probably twice the cost, I would guess, because again, this plant is currently, with its infrastructure, treating all of the biosolids for the entire city. So that's a significant benefit to using the existing infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. So what's our next step, I guess? What do we need to, I mean, are we going to adopt this recommendation at the council meeting? Is that what's being suggested? And then where we go from there?
So next steps, unless council has any other comments, is we're going to submit the pre-design report to DEQ for review and approval.
Okay. And so I guess Roger or Nicole, we have a financial consultant, and I'm presuming that this has been analyzed and part of our rates has been, this has been projected, correct?
You're correct. It has been shared with our rate study consultant.
So we don't have to go out for a bond or anything like that. The rates that we have implemented are indicated to cover this.
Correct. We would do this similar to what we've done with Plant One. We would manage the capital cost through making debt service payments. We would probably be going right back to DEQ for loans. I believe our current loan for Plant Two, I believe we got it down to 1%, if I remember right, on that loan. And so there's probably no better place to get a loan than DEQ at this point in time.
Are there any grants available for this type of project?
Not for a city of our size. If we were under 10,000 in population, there are some available funds through USDA, but unfortunately, we don't qualify.
Okay.
Anything else, Joe?
No, that's it. Thank you.
I actually have a couple quick, well, Joe took one of them, so never mind. I have one question. On phase 3, you said, is it effluent pump station? You
Yeah,
said
effluent pumping.
You said if needed. So what if it is needed? That's 15 years down the line.
Yeah, it could be, its need is projected based on DEQ's methodology for projecting a peak flow based on storms and current flows through the plant. And the current flows through the plant are known reasonably well, but applying that DEQ methodology projects a very high peak instantaneous flow. And even DEQ agreed in our facility plan amendment that it wasn't reasonable to assume that that would be it and that you would need to put effluent pumping in now. There's been no evidence in the plant operation of anything that's approached that value. And you would know, people at the plant would know if they got anywhere near that. So
So it's highly unlikely, is that what you're saying?
I think the need for it is highly unlikely in the next 10 to 15 years, and probably beyond that.
Thank you. Anything else? Carmen, Steph?
Joe asked one of the questions that I was going to ask. I just want to make sure that we're not going to be nickel and dime for the next 10 to 15 years to where we reach that point that, you know, I mean, weighing new versus what we've got going on here.
A new plant versus,
Yeah.
Again, the heart of this plant is the aeration basin. That's 1973 construction, but it's basically a big concrete box. And that gives you a lot of future flexibility as well. There are infrastructure intensification is the word that engineers use, but there's ways to get more treatment out of the same volume. And the only reason we didn't really explore that here is we don't need to. There's adequate volume to treat now, but if loads were to significantly increase, you know, climate refugees coming to Coos Bay maybe, then I think you would still look first at expanding within the infrastructure you've got, especially since you're going to have to found all this stuff on 60-foot piles. And it's an expensive foundation, which is a real incentive to try to find a way to extend the life of what you have and use it. And you know, the clarifier's in good condition, and the aeration basin as well. So the fundamental parts of the plant are certainly worth continuing to use.
So we're good with that portion of it, and if there's a need to explore that, that is an option for modification. Still have.
Yeah. So, for example, the city of Bend, and I think we even proposed this when we did the value assessment for Plant 2 back in 2013. I don't think my hair was gray then. What they've done, and they've got, you know, breweries in town that are contributing a lot of load to the plant. I mean, comparable to, you know, the load that's going to Plant 2 from Coos Bay. They used a infrastructure intensification technique that actually has, the mayor would know the pasta shape, the little round ones. They basically form a floating surface for the biology to grow on, and dramatically increase the amount of biology that you can have in a basin. You just have to put more air in there to keep them alive and active. But they're able to double the amount of load that they could treat within the same physical volume. So that is a technology that you would consider here if load growth precipitated that. Yeah.
And in reference to plant two, it would be a substantially bigger, more expensive plant than what plant two was.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
like
Yeah.
twice.
It's twice the size of plant two in
With
terms of flow.
digesters and
Yeah.
much more involved, bigger plant, so.
Anything else?
I don't have much.
Well, thank you for your presentation,
you.
and I think your hair color is fantastic. Next item is discussion regarding potential library bond issuance. Do you want to give the background on this, Roger?
I certainly can. Back in 2014, after signs of settlement at the library, the city conducted an exhaustive investigation into the stability of the foundation at the library, and it was determined that the library foundation had failed. There were alternatives to fix the library foundation, but at the time that was deemed to be far too expensive and extreme. It would have caused the city to close the library for more than a year, evacuate everything out of the building, put in over 208 micro piles at a depth of 120 foot each, at a cost at that time, I believe, in the neighborhood of $8 million. That was 2014 dollars. And it was determined that that would only fix the foundation. It wouldn't fix the roof. It wouldn't fix the HVAC. It didn't reconfigure the library to meet the current needs. It's a 60-year-old facility. So we began moving forward. Fast forward, a lot of work has been put into determining location, funding strategies, and moving forward. Part of our funding strategy included going to the legislature and requesting capital improvement dollars. It's part of every legislative session that they take requests. Unfortunately, our request to fund half of that did not meet approval this funding cycle. Our plan and strategy at the time was to get that half from them and then to go to the voters for an additional portion plus money raised through grant writing and fundraising. At a previous council work session, the council thought it might be best to wait to go to the vote of the people until the next legislative session. Although that does cause us an issue, the reality is the library building is failing. We're at a point now where we probably have to replace the roof, or we could see an early demise of the building even quicker than the deterioration of the foundation. Recently, at a library board meeting, and I want to say that there's a host of supporters for the library. And just to name of the few of the groups, you have the library board, the library foundation, the Friends of the Library, and then the council appointed back in 2014 a library steering committee, which is made up of members of those three groups, along with staff and council representatives. Based on their meeting, they believe it's wiser not to wait, but then to go out to a vote of the people in May of next year. That was seconded by the Library Foundation, and today the steering committee echoed the same. They would like to see go out sooner rather than later. In the meantime, because we've done some additions and changes to the Empire Urban Renewal District, we believe that there's still some work that can be taken to make that site more shovel-ready, which includes, and I probably should turn this over to our city engineer, who is a little more well-versed on this next part.
Okay, thank you, Roger. We believe that the next steps are to get to what we call a 15% level of design. And in order to do that, we need to site this library. We've got topography challenges and wetland challenges. And so until we do that, we're really not going to know true cost. And like Roger said, getting that 15% level of design also might help with potential future funding for this project. So the site, for those of you who don't know, it's at the south end of Topics Park next to the National Guard Armory. In order to do that, we'd like to advertise an RFQ, a request for qualifications. Because of the price tag, we think that we can't ask for proposals. We think it's going to be a qualifications-based selection. And we'd like to find a team that's comprised of, initially anyways, an architect, an engineer, and a biologist to help site this library and develop that 15% level of design. And in our statement of work in the qualifications request, we would also say that, this is, first step is 15%. The next step would be taking that 15% to final design, and we would like to do it with this team that we comprise at the 15% level, just to maintain consistency. But for whatever reason, if we're not happy with our design team, we can also opt out. But the goal is to stay with the same team. And then the team probably would grow, and we'd get a geologist and a structural on board, and whatever other special engineering fields we need.
Do you have anything else to add, Roger?
Yeah, I think in the meantime, we're also going to be looking at a couple things that have to happen in order to keep our current library building open. And one would be to replace the roof. We don't expect it to last, to 10 years or even 20 years with the building shifting, but it would at least stop the rain intrusion into the building. In addition, we do need to repair one of the emergency exit doors that's now not functioning. We did have a team of staff that went through the building, which included the city engineer, the building official, the fire chief, police chief, the operations administrator. It was quite a team, and they did a thorough review of the building. There is obviously signs of stress on the exterior walls, and we have one corner that has slumped. None of the large beams appear to be coming apart. Most of the damage we're seeing right now is from the rain intrusion, and if we can slow that down, we can stop the deterioration of the building so that we're not prematurely having to vacate the building. Even if we do all that, we can, I don't expect that we can use the building much more than a few more years. The need for a building is inevitable. And I would just share just a little cost factor. That building is 26,000 square feet. If we had to go rent another facility, even at the modest price of 50 cents per square foot, we would spend more in 1 year than we will spend on replacing the roof.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We have Kurt, Bob, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think there's a couple of,
Kurt, you might go to the microphone for the people online so they can hear you. Sorry.
Thanks. I have trouble hearing too.
I think there's a couple of important points. Roger talked about doing a roof repair at the library. I think the important thing you have to keep in your mind, you should qualify that by saying temporary roof repair. Because the very best that you're going to be able to do is stop some of the water inundation of the library for a short period of time. It doesn't fix the fundamental problem, which is the foundation fail. And so that building moves all the time. And in the wet season, it moves more than it moves in the dry season. It moves not only up and down, but it moves a little bit side to side. And so consequently, the thought has been putting some kind of membrane on top of it to temporarily fix it. I mean, that's your best hope. As Roger said, it's not going to be the kind of repair that's going to make that library fine for a long period of time. It really is a short-term repair. So you say, well, why do it? Well, you have to do it right now because
that water inundation is getting so bad in that building, you're starting to jeopardize the collection. Starting to jeopardize all the books in there, the videos, the audios, the computer system for people that come in and use it. It's gotten bad enough that we no longer can use the study room. We no longer can use the large meeting room because the water inundation has gotten so bad. And it seems like every year a new place opens up. There really is probably no place in the library right now where we haven't had water leak into the building. So continuing that will do continual structural damage. It risks the collection. It also risks the health and safety of the staff and public that are using that library. So, you know, as much as it's a good idea not to put a lot of money in a building that's failing, and I understand that, a temporary fix of that roof is really something that's probably needed, or you lose use of that library in a very short period of time. So, and that would have a significant impact on the community. It would have a significant impact on the city because you would have to let employees go. It's just not a very, you know, it's not a place you want to find yourself, I don't think. So that's my 2 cents on the roof part. And I know people will say, well, Guy, you're fixing the library, so it should be fine. And I understand where they're coming from. But the reality is that it really is a temporary fix to a building whose foundation is down. And that's the best you can get out of it. Okay? All right, thanks.
Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Kurt. I was gonna ask and make that point, that this roof is a temporary fix. The assessment team that went in and looked, Roger, what kind of life, time-wise, are we gonna get replacing that with a temporary roof? I mean, how much time, based on what you've seen and the aging of that building?
We think that's a crystal ball answer. In reality, I
Magic
mean,
8
you're
ball.
talking about a 50-year roof that you might get 5 to 7 years out of at best. I mean, and that's why you're going with the membrane, because of flexibility, but it really will depend on how much it moves if we're going to need to get it repaired.
Well, and that's part of the reason that I asked, because what is the timeline if we are to go out earlier to voters versus when a new facility would be built? And I know that that's a crystal ball answer too.
No, I still think you're looking, let's say you had approval in May and you had all the funding available, I still think you're at least 2 years out before you'd realize a new building, by the time you get through design and the actual building.
Oh, that seems.
That's at best.
I was gonna say that seemed quick.
Yeah, and I actually think that that's probably being a little optimistic, to tell you the truth.
I'm an optimistic guy.
I really think, you know, from a time a bond measure passes, you're probably 3 years to occupancy between going through the architectural selection process and contractor selection process and any potential appeals who get selected and then actually building out on that site. And I'm glad you brought that up, because see, that's the important part of this roof. It's just like saying, well, if you're going to build a new building again, why do you need it? Other than the explanation I gave you, it also is, even under the best circumstances with a bond passing right away, you are, you know, easily 3 years out. You can't have that building in the condition that it's in with the roof that it's got on it right now last those 3 years. It just will not happen. I'm not a roofer. I do have a membrane on part of the deck at my house, and I would be surprised if a roofer gave you much of a warranty on a building that's moving.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, the regular warranty may be 50 years, but once they say, you know, this building's moving so much, we're not going to warranty this for, you know, a short period of time. So, okay.
And also a tough question to answer, but I know that all of those interested organizations that we have for the library have been watching this, as well as the city staff. If we do nothing, how close are we potentially to closing that library?
Well, the Myrtlewood room's already closed, isn't it?
The large meeting room this last year developed a really significant leak. And the city was nice enough to actually have a roofer go up there and take a look at it. And his report was, you don't have a roof, you have a filter. All it's doing is filtering the water that goes through there. And there's some issues around some of the high vac equipment up there as well. So, I mean, it's like tar and gravel up there, and, you know, it's just one of these things that's deteriorated. And then, like I said, part of the difficulty is this stuff all cracks when the building moves. And that room is not usable at all. The study room is not usable at all. The study room has not been used for a fairly long time. It's near a junction where the addition was put on to the old building, and they kind of settle at different rates. And so it causes some difficulty. And I think any of you that have been in there and taken the tour, it's kind of where the videos are out from if the checkout desk is here and there's the video stuff over here, we've probably taken and let you walk over there. If you saw the video, you saw the ball rolling down the floor. That's kind of at that junction too, and those two buildings are really separating at different times. I mean, it's just a fact of life of that building, unfortunately. There's everything from Mingus Park and Blossom Gulch Slough that drains behind it in Bennett Street. It gets a lot of water inundation. The soil underneath there is saturated. There's a lot of heavy traffic on the road. All those things contribute to the piling and there eventually failing. And that's the other thing. They would fail there anyways. Plus the expense of putting in a deep foundation, as we were talking about with the water plant, it's just, you know, just crazy expensive. Forget about all the flood zone and tsunami zone stuff. So, okay, thanks.
Any questions, comments?
What kind of timing are we I mean, can we get this roof fixed this summer? Is that a possibility?
Well, it all depends on contractor availability. I know that we're putting the scope of work together currently, and we'll be going out for bid, but it'll all depend on if we can get a contractor. And
That's
we
going to
all
be
know
tough.
where the contractors are. They're all busy.
It's going to be tough.
Extremely busy.
Personally, I think this is kind of, we need to do this now. I mean, that would be the way I look at this.
We approved that roof portion already.
Oh,
Right
we
now,
did.
we're trying to determine whether or not we're gonna go out for the bond.
Right.
Okay. So
And
the
you'll
roof is-
continue
okay.
this discussion on next week at your council meeting. And I think that's what the library board, the foundation, and the steering committee is looking for, your response to their request to go ahead and move it to the May date.
If we go for the bond, are we going for half with the expectation that we will get funding later? No.
No.
So it'd be for the full bond amount, or for the full project amount?
That's correct.
Which is estimated 20.
Currently, it's at 25 million because there's some unknowns. Unknowns as to exactly where it'll go on the site, what type of foundation it will require, and that's why we want to start that other prong with getting to that 15% or so. So we know where it's going to go, what type of, then we can move forward. Will it need a deep foundation? Will it not?
The fact that we got denied through funding this legislative session, does that mean we are not eligible to reapply next session?
Oh, we will be able to reapply. I think the closer we can get to shovel-ready, the better chance we have. We are competing with a lot of other projects.
Mm-hmm. Is it possible to do a bond measure for just half of the project amount so that we could maybe be more attractive to the legislation funding us, or is that not what
You certainly could. I think you're taking a chance because if you only get half the bond amount and you don't get something from a future grant request, what are we going to build?
could you make it tied
So-
in?
So maybe a better question is what happens when we go out for the 25 million and we get that passed, and then funding comes through from the state?
Then you can under levy and not pull your full funding request, and so your voters would have to pay far less.
Oh,
So
okay.
it would be a benefit to the,
Well, that's good.
we're covered, but it would be a benefit
Correct.
to our taxpayers.
I wonder if the legislation will still fund it if it's fully funded, though,
Well, there's certainly quite a few projects that get funded around the state.
that are like that, where,
I don't know for sure, but that's exactly what the lobbying firm that we were working with had suggested, that we
okay.
had a better opportunity. None of the projects were fully funded. At most, they got funded at 50%.
I see.
So the budget implications on this are hard to tell, but we would fund a portion of the ballot cost every time that we would have to go out for this. Is that a concern?
Yes, so I posed that question to the county clerk to find out what those costs may be, and of course, like any good financial person, they don't like to predict those because it's unknown who will put things on the ballot. Obviously, with the upcoming year, with the primary and general, there's potential for reduced costs. So that is a nice kind of benefit in waiting this out a bit. The last, I believe, May was in the $60,000 range, and the November election was in the $120,000 range. And that can be shared, or it can be all your cost if there's not additional items on the ballot.
Oh, wow.
So my question is, though, that this council approved going on the November ballot, so did we not already account for this anyway?
We were working on the process. I think this Empire Amendment was to kind of give us access to some funds for that. But we were also working on the premise that some of the state funds would, kind of help, and we'd be at reduced costs. So we're somewhat prepared, but I don't know, Roger.
Gotta get creative.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but I think we have capacity to, to move forward in this budget year with some support from the Empire URA.
Personally, I think we gotta move.
Joe, any comment, question?
I just want to know, so the steering committee suggested moving forward for the May election?
The steering committee, the library foundation, and the library board all recommended going for the May election.
Okay, because I saw that the steering committee was meeting today. I think that's what I read, so I just was curious. No, I think we need to move forward on it. We need to do something. We could sit by and try to go to the legislature, but then it's that in 2 years, Roger?
That's correct.
So that's 2 years, and then that puts us further behind. And I think Susan, at our last meeting, suggested that we try to move forward on this and get this approved. And I guess we follow the suggestions of the library board and steering committee, and I would suggest that we do the same thing here.
Susan, do you have a comment?
I wanted to explain how you cost an election. When I spoke with Debbie about this November and there was nothing else on the ballot, which meant the city had to eat the whole freight, remember that you don't even have 3 full precincts that are voting on this. Got about 11,000 voters. The cost of the election is based on the number of voters you have, and the cost she gave me for the full election, if we had nothing else on the ballot, was $20 grand. Charleston is going out for their transit tax again, so we already know they're on the ballot for May of 2022. So I'm really surprised. At a regular full election, the costs you gave are actual because you got the whole county, but this is just our precinct, the 1 full precinct and 2 partial precincts.
So the cost would be shared then by not just the city of Coos Bay, but Charleston Sanitary? Or
Yeah, no,
Charleston?
the Charleston tax will cover more
tax.
precincts, so then she's got to do this weird calculation where she figures out what our share would be versus their share would be. But the more things on the ballot, the less your share. But what she gave for November, when we were the only thing on the ballot expected, was 20 grand for those 3 precincts.
Thank you. So, I serve on the library board and the library steering committee, and in the time I've been on there, I've learned that there's some really dedicated and committed volunteers for the library. I worry that waiting 2 years, you're going to lose not only the momentum of what they put forward so far, but also quite possibly their motivation to continue with those efforts. Also, serving on that, I've learned what an asset the library is to the community. Pre-pandemic, I don't know if people know this, but they check out over 20,000 items a month and get close to 15,000 visitors a month. I don't want to be a part of a council that could potentially, their action or inaction could cause the library to close. So until I get valid information otherwise, I'm going to continue to support moving forward with this, with the new library, because it's so important. So I think we should go for the May election.
I agree. Well stated.
I would agree. I think, like we discussed at the last agency meeting when we were talking about this, or council, I can't remember which one, but, you know, we have a lot of great minds involved in all facets of this, and I think if they're confident that they can move forward with this, then we have to put our faith in that as well. I think something that we haven't talked about is the added benefit beyond just a library we get with a new facility. And, you know, that's a gathering place for, in the event of a natural disaster or other things. This is a bigger project than just a library. It's a community center.
Another point I should make is that as a council, we're not allowed to campaign for a bond, so it's these volunteers that are going to be doing the heavy lifting. And so we've got three groups that have said that they want to go forward, so I think we should honor that as well. Any other comments? Okay. Kurt, Susan, anything to add? Okay, we'll move on to the G, discussion regarding proposed flag policy.
Yeah, I'm going to be taking that one. Recently, a citizen approached the city requesting to have a flag, pride flag, placed on a flagpole here at, I don't know the specific where they wanted it, but it was one of the city's flagpoles for the month of June to recognize Pride Month. The request was not granted as the city, we kind of came to the conclusion we needed a city policy. We didn't have a policy for the use of our flagpoles. This led, you know, me to do some research, and the city itself has a First Amendment right to express its opinions, thoughts, sentiments, and in order to do so, in terms of putting up a commemorative flag or a celebratory flag, you need a policy, and we prepared a draft policy for you to take a look at. The concern, obviously, is we don't want to set a precedent that anybody who wants to put their flag up will put their flag up. It's not a First Amendment right of someone who wants to put something up on the flagpole. It's the city's First Amendment right to express the position or sentiment of the city as expressed by the council. Doesn't necessarily mean all citizens might agree with it, but it's that's why the process here involves, at least the proposed process here involves having two council members make the suggestion or make the request that we put it on council agenda, where there'd be some discussion, and if the council passes the resolution to allow for the placement of the flag by a supermajority, which would be 5 out of 7, not regular majority, then that could proceed. And there's a process in terms of timing, at least 60 days prior to the date of the proposed flag, the proposal should be made. And this came out from a request for the pride flag, but it's certainly not limited to that. It could be any number of different flags for celebrating veterans, anything like that. But it does give, obviously, the city the flexibility of not having to put flags which do not express the sentiments of the council. So you've had the flag policy before you. What we're basically looking to do is take a look at it and ask any questions you might have. And if you feel it's appropriate, you feel comfortable with the flag policy, that you approve the flag policy.
Thank you. So we have a couple signed up for public comment. Is it Onse Tauber?
Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I live and work in Coos Bay. I'm a trans man and my pronouns are he, him, although most of the clients I see for therapy call me dude. As my job focuses mainly on listening and not on public speaking, I hope everyone here will forgive my reading from this paper, but I couldn't be silent about this. A growing number of Coos Bay citizens identify as some part of the LGBTQ+ community. I know because I work with a lot of them, and not just through the board of Southern Oregon Coast Pride. Many of the youth and teens I work with in my various capacities have expressed feeling unsafe to live their authentic selves in Coos Bay. I would be lying if I said that there haven't been times that I have felt the same way, including as I give this speech. Community should be a place of value and acceptance. When people do not feel safe in their own community, their mental health declines. According to the American Psychiatric Association, LGBTQ plus people are more than twice as likely to experience a mental health disorder in their lifetime than their non-LGBTQ counterparts. The rate of suicidal gestures is 4 times higher for lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth than heterosexual youth. 40% of trans youth have considered suicide, and 60% of trans youth engage in self-harming behaviors. These statistics are uncomfortable, frightening, and what myself and other mental health professionals encounter every day. By contrast, when a trans person is accepted by their community, that 40% drops to 7%. Flying a flag may seem trivial, but for members of the LGBTQ plus community, this flag represents unity and acceptance. By flying the pride flag, the city will show its LGBTQ plus citizens that we are welcome, accepted, and valued by the Coos Bay community. Community acceptance is mental health care. Community acceptance is suicide prevention. In addition to the positive effects of flying the pride flag for the LGBTQ community, flying the pride flag will have a positive impact on the non-LGBTQ citizens of Coos Bay. When an issue does not affect us, we as human beings don't tend to think about it. I am guilty of this, as I am sure many of us in this room are. We as humans also have a tendency to not investigate our values and why we believe what we believe. I grew up bombarded by negative associations with queerness until I began encountering queer people and public statements of acceptance. As my wider community showed more acceptance, I felt comfortable being emotionally vulnerable and intellectually curious. I questioned my beliefs and ultimately changed them. I can't change people's beliefs, but I do want to encourage those without an LGBTQ person in their lives to be curious about their own beliefs. The city supporting the flying of a pride flag promotes that curiosity. Please vote to fly the pride flag during Pride Month, if not year-round. This flag represents acceptance, belonging, unity, community, and so many other things for so many people. I hope that what I said has been impactful for you to hear, as it was for me to write. Everyone longs to be loved, and the greatest thing you can do is to let people know that they are loved and capable of loving. That was a quote from Mr. Rogers, a good man who I try to honor every day in my professional and personal life. But that isn't my favorite quote. My favorite quote is his most famous. We are here, we are queer, and we're your neighbors. Please be ours. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, we have an Octavia on here.
I don't believe they're.
Octavia's not. Did anyone else want to make a comment?
Hi, my name is Cameron Stringfield. I've been here before in the council chambers. You guys know me as Cameron Langley. It was a bit of a heated year last year, but trying to ground myself now. Anyway, I am the citizen that came forward with the pride flag proposal. I actually had bought a pride flag last year, and then I had lost it, and I bought another one, and so I had 2. And that's what led me to say, hey, maybe we should fly this around here. I would echo what Ant said about representation for the pride flag being up and how it brings some curiosity to this community and gets questions started, because I came out as trans earlier this year, and it's been a ride. But I have a good amount of people who support me around here, but there are also people who are incredibly transphobic, fascists around here that adamantly do not. And seeing an official body like the city put up a pride flag and to have that be a bit of a resistance towards that hatred that I've faced would mean so much to me, and I'm sure it would to anybody else in this community. And also, I'm glad that you're taking precautions about the flag policy too, because there are flags that I definitely don't want to see flown here, like the Confederate flag or a thin blue line flag or certain flags that just really have no reason to be flown. Because the pride flag isn't hateful in any regard. It's representative of people in your community, constituents that matter. So that's just what I wanted to add, and thank you for taking the time to discuss this.
Thank you. Any other comments? So Nate, in reading this policy, it takes 2 council members to suggest a flag be flown?
That's the way we drafted it. You could modify that, you could make it 1, you could make it 3.
So if this took effect and 2 councilors, they wanted to fly the pride flag and they wanted to make a motion to fly it every June, would that fall within this policy or not?
Yes. I mean, 2 would come, would contact Roger, put it on the agenda, and, you know, as long as it's 60 days prior, I mean, June, so you're talking April, probably you'd hope a little earlier than that, just so that there's time to organize it and get it done properly, whether it's the pride flag or any other flag.
So just to expand on that question, this policy allows, you know, for a 7-day period work week, but it could be extended.
Yeah, I mean, the way it's put together, that's generally what it is, but I think it provides, you can go up to a month, 31 days. And certainly, this is just a draft. You want to alter it in some fashion, that's fine too. In my research, I saw some that just said 24 hours, others longer. It's really up to how you want to implement it. We can make the changes. The key is that it's the city council making a decision on what's going to be flown and what's not going to be flown.
Questions, comments?
This says the display of flags at city facilities. So is that mostly just here, maybe the visitors information center or the boardwalk? What flag poles are we talking?
It would probably be at the boardwalk.
Mostly at the board, or yeah,
Right.
not necessarily here, because we have specific ones for the specific poles here,
Yeah.
right?
The one at the Visitor Information Center was purchased by a veterans group
I see.
and donated to the city for the flying of the American flag.
I see. And we have lots of flag poles at the boardwalk.
I think we have 8 currently, if I
Oh,
remember
really?
right. We had more. They've some of them gone away with time. That's a future project so that we can bring back more.
I see. Okay. And this would, if a couple of council members went forward with a request, it would be for that specific timeline, not necessarily a reoccurring?
I think that depends on the motion of the council,
I see.
and should it get the supermajority. I think it could go either way.
I see.
So why did you pick supermajority? Was that just what you saw a lot of?
I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Why'd you pick?
Why'd you pick supermajority?
That's what I saw was in other jurisdictions, generally there was supermajority. I don't think it's required. If you want a simple majority, I think you could do that too. It's just what I was seeing was primarily other jurisdictions having a supermajority.
Joe, any questions, comments?
Yeah, I think we need some more time on this. I don't have a problem with it, but I think needs to be some specifics that aren't in here. I think we need to say it's going to be at the boardwalk, number one. Number two, I think it should be like 7 days or whatever period we agree on, and I think it should be adopted annually. I don't think it should be a policy that can be done forever, because I don't think we should be tying future councils to whatever our beliefs are at this time. And I guess my question, Nate, to you is, if we adopt one flag to be flown and then we don't do another, how does that compromise us with the First Amendment? I mean, does this policy protect us from that, or?
Yes, I mean, the idea of having the policy is the city is asserting its First Amendment right to express its sentiments, its beliefs, whether it's a pride flag or any other flag. It does not give Joe citizen on the street a right to say, okay, you've flown this flag, I want to fly a different flag. Maybe that one has an opposite sentiment to the pride flag or some other flag. It gives the city the flexibility to say no under those circumstances. It doesn't create a First Amendment right on anyone who wants to fly a flag.
Okay. So I just, personally, I think that there's some things that need to be put into this policy that are lacking at this moment. But yes, I think it's something that we need to have in place.
I also think we need to hear from the entire council, rather than
I
just
agree.
4 of us.
And the other thing I think that needs to be in here, so the way I see this, Nate, and tell me if I'm wrong. So for instance, you're asking for 5/7 of the council to approve a flying of a specific flag that is brought by 2 councilors. But a majority of the council could change this policy. Am I correct?
Yeah, you could. It's just a
So
policy.
I think so it's, counterintuitive, or it's counterproductive if you have 5/7 and need to adopt the policy of the flag, whichever is brought forth, but then the majority of the council could switch the policy, which could change what could happen. So I think these are some of the things that we need to think about as a council, so they don't conflict with each other. I personally think to change this policy, if we do this, it needs to be unanimous. That way it sets a policy in place, and then it takes 5/7 of the council, or whatever the council believes should be, to agree on a flag flying, or whichever flag 2 councilors bring forth.
Any other comments, questions?
When you were doing your research, did you see any like prescribed schedules of flag presentations that cities were doing, like one based on nationally recognized weeks or anything like that, or was it mostly council discretion?
Pretty much council discretion.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, right. I think you're right.
Yep.
Council
And I
discretion.
think that was one of the comments that was brought up by the council, is that it should be at the discretion of the council under a policy, as opposed to just saying, here's a schedule of what's happening, because the council is going to be making this decision, not a schedule.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Comment? Can you go to the mic, please?
Yeah, I just have a question about when this vote happens on a specific flag. Is that happening in a public meeting like this that we get to attend? Okay, thank you.
Yes, all our votes are public. Is there any further discussion on this matter? I kind of agree with Joe that I'd like to spend a little more time on looking at this before we make a decision.
I agree. Just need to iron out a few details.
All right, next item is discussion regarding proposed time, manner, and place camping ordinance.
So I'll take this one. A couple of years ago, there was an important case affecting cities' abilities to manage no camping in their cities. The case was known as Martin v. Boise, and it affects all of the western states that come under the purview of the Ninth Circuit Court. Basically, what came out of that case, out of Boise, is the Ninth Circuit said you can't criminalize a person sleeping in public if they don't have another type of shelter. If there's not shelters available and there's no place for them to go, that can't be criminal. That changed a lot of ordinances, or at least made them ineffective. In addition, this year, the Oregon legislature passed House Bill 3115, which basically says cities have to allow persons who are experiencing homelessness, if there are no shelters, to stay in public places, but does give cities the ability to put in place what's called time, manner, and place restrictions, such as in Coos Bay currently, no one can be in the parks after dark. So therefore, the non-camping ordinance for that meets the statute applied by Oregon. Furthermore, there are places that aren't cohesive to people either resting or sleeping. Sadly, we had a very tragic incident this year in a parking lot in downtown where a homeless individual decided to rest in the middle of a parking lot. A vehicle came around the corner, couldn't see that person, and unfortunately resulted in that person's death. So we began, just like many other cities, began looking at our ordinances. Where is it appropriate for people to rest? When is it appropriate for people to rest? Those type of things. We looked at a number of other cities, what they were doing, and we found McMinnville's, and who modeled an ordinance after Vancouver, Washington's. And we took that, reviewed it, and then provided it to the homeless work group. We've actually had 2 meetings with them and also shared it with elected officials in the city of North Bend. Obviously, we're very close. Some of the same people frequent Coos Bay, frequent North Bend. And we wanted to put together something that, one, met with the criteria of the law provided. So what we have put together for you is an ordinance that discusses where it's appropriate to camp and where it's not. And in this case, when I say appropriate, lawful or unlawful, in addition to when is it lawful for people to rest on public places such as public sidewalks or in vehicles. Obviously, the police department spends a great deal amount of time responding to conflicts, either involving homeless individuals and other citizens, or homeless individuals and homeless individuals, other homeless individuals. So what you have before you is an ordinance that has been reviewed at least on 2 occasions, and technically 3 if you count with North Bend, and they're obviously reviewing something very similar and looking to see what happens here. So in large part, camping on public places would not be allowed in residential zones. Although, if a homeowner or a renter and the property owner were agreeable, someone could camp in someone's backyard or in a vehicle in their driveway, just not on a city street. There are, and I'll try and make sure I get it all here, but there are areas that are acceptable, and that is either in commercial, industrial, or mixed-use areas where people could rest in public places between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 in the morning. If they're in a vehicle, they would actually have to obey your current parking regulations, and that is something that's currently under review, which limits them to 72 hours in any one space. Generally, if people stay longer than 72 hours, it usually denotes that either the vehicle is inoperable, unregistered, unlicensed, and denotes that it is either being abandoned or non-operable. This requires people to move around and not create the conflicts that are happening right now. Some of the people that have stayed in one place for a long period of time, more than 3 days, appear to be accumulating things and then putting the things out into the public right-of-ways and causing issues. That is also a different violation. So we're trying to find some happy mediums here, and we think this ordinance actually provides that happy medium, one that's compliable with Martin v. Boise and House Bill 3115. It does provide people that don't have otherwise a place to go, a place to rest, even if it's temporary. It's probably the best that we can come up with. Appears that this has stood at least some court cases in the McMinnville area, and I'm assuming up in Washington as well.
Questions?
I was just going to make a couple more comments. I was able to sit in on the subcommittee that discussed this with city officials, as well as, chairing the homeless work group. And I think it's important to note that rather than take a piecemeal approach when we have situations arise, this ordinance actually encompasses citywide, and that way we're not just saying, well, we had a conflict here and we've had to, deal with that. This actually lays it out, and it becomes a tool in the toolbox for our law enforcement that are dealing with issues and conflicts with homelessness on a very high percentage of their calls. So this actually provides them information, tools, and educational opportunities for folks in our community that are experiencing homelessness. And it's much more compassionate, I believe, and I kind of feel like that's, we have this think tank of folks that represent different segments of our community, and they kind of felt this was a good process to go as well. The other thing is that, as Roger said, this is important that we look at this. We're looking at this as a city, but also as a community, because homelessness is just not a situation we're experiencing. We also had county representation as well at this last meeting. So it's something that all of us are looking at, and it's an important piece, and we're the first ones dealing with the ordinance issue. So.
Anyone else? I have a question. So we passed an ordinance a while back for camping at, I think it was nonprofits or places of worship.
Yeah,
one of the
temporary
two.
lodging ordinance.
So in here it says real property developed and owned by a religious institution, place of worship, regardless of zoning designation of the property. So I think that previous ordinance was restricting it within a certain amount of yards of a school, wasn't it?
That's correct. Current under state law, at least under religious organizations, they can be in any district. And the state law allows, subject to approval of a local ordinance, that they can have up to 3 people stay on their property. This ordinance actually limits the number down to 3 and no more than 3. And under state law, the council can't adjust it more than 3. So this one actually, while it does allow it in more areas, it does limit it down to 3. And when you think about, let's say, residential, it's no different than a residential property owner could allow someone to camp in their yard or in a vehicle on their driveway. It just allows for 2 more. And generally, most religious organizations have much larger properties than a residential.
It also expands to nonprofit
Correct.
organizations as well, which we don't currently have in our ordinance.
Not that I think that a lot of organizations are going to take advantage of this. I mean, we only had one church that actually truly did it, at least in Coos Bay. I know there's a church in North Bend that's doing it as well.
Any other questions, comments?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Emil Dragowski, and I've been living in this city for a few months now, and I'm actually quite pleased to be attending the meeting and living here.
Could you do me a favor and pull the mic down a little bit? Thank you.
Yes. In the language of the policy, I'm curious what guidance is provided for the human functions that go with resting, relieving oneself. So do the policies, as a newcomer to town, I'm not sure if I'm resting in a mixed zone area, you know, what I might do if I had an urgent need. So hopefully I've explained my point of curiosity adequately, and I'll return to my seat.
Roger, did you want to answer that?
Well, you know, we've added at least some portable restrooms into the downtown area, but I assume that such will have to be the case in the Empire District as well. And then, of course, the council has approved an urban camping program that's being operated by a nonprofit, which also provides for sanitary needs. But I know other cities are having to add more public restrooms or porta potties around their cities for areas where people are camping.
So for the camping itself, if they're at a facility in the ordinance, it would, I mean, if I were to allow someone to camp in my driveway, per se, then I would have to allow facilities to relieve themselves, or.
Correct.
So, and that's included in the ordinance. Same thing with nonprofit parking lots or.
Or churches.
Churches. I couldn't think of, thank you, yeah.
Anyone else? Joe, you good?
Well, I was on this same committee with Stephanie, and I think this is a step in the right direction. It gives the officers some tools, as she mentioned, guidelines. Without it, we have no guidelines for the officers. I imagine it's extremely frustrating, but I think this is a great first step. And the Martin Boise law or issue will never go away with HB Bill 3115 because this makes it permanent, if I understand correctly. Is that right, Nate?
Yeah, that's unless they get rid of the law.
Correct. I mean, the state would have to get rid of that law. Otherwise, the state of Oregon this is something that we will have to be accepting and dealing with. And so I think this is necessary.
Thank you. So if there's no further comments or questions, that's it for our agenda this evening. Any comments from the council or the mayor? Just general? Hearing none, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good job.